I'm Elizabeth Marshall, 33 years old, and despite having a successful career in finance, I've never felt quite good enough for my father. The annual family reunion dinner was just around the corner, and this year I was dreading it more than ever. I had purchased a luxury car for him as a peace offering, holding on to the hope that this time things might be different. Little did I realize that inside my handbag was a paper that would alter my entire life. By the time the evening was over, I would finally grasp why my dad had never shown me affection. Before I delve into my tale, please let me know where you're tuning in from. Also, hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever confronted someone who failed to recognize your value. Believe me, my tale could also inspire the bravery you're looking for. Raised in a wealthy suburb of Columbus, we seemed like the ideal family to everyone on the outside. However, within our home, the reality was quite another story. My father, Edward Campbell, had developed his real estate business from humble origins into a hugely successful enterprise worth millions. He cherished success, prestige, and esteem more than anything, even family bonds. From my youngest memories, he was not the type of father who showed up at school plays or assisted with homework. Rather, he was the stern critic who insisted my B-plus grades should have been A's, who queried why I hadn't been selected as team captain, who pointed out that second place was merely the first loser. My mother, Carol, contrasted him in numerous ways. She was warm and loving when he was absent, but she transformed into someone else when he was nearby, almost diminishing in size, never disagreeing with him, never defending us kids when his critiques were excessive. It was a dynamic I didn't fully grasp until I had aged considerably. This peculiar influence he had over her, the way her eyes would flick toward him before she responded to even basic inquiries about meal arrangements or weekend plans. My siblings and I were raised in this intricate family setup. My elder brother John was 4 years older than me, and without a doubt the star of the family. He excelled in football, consistently made the honor roll, went out with the appropriate girls from well-respected families, and finally joined our father in the real estate industry after completing his studies at the same college our father attended. Everything seemed effortless for Michael. At least, that's how it looked from my perspective. He always seemed to naturally grasp what would make our father happy, while I perpetually misjudged. My younger sister, Sophie, who is 2 years my junior, always seemed to find her way through the challenging dynamics of our father's approval process more effectively than I could. She wasn't the standout that John was, but she possessed an innate charm and an almost magical knack for sensing the atmosphere, knowing precisely when to voice her thoughts and when to step back. She evolved into the family's mediator, the person who sometimes managed to make Dad chuckle even when his spirits were low. The one who would quietly come into my room following especially harsh critique sessions to reassure me that things weren't as grim as they appeared. Yet, for me, it never seemed sufficient. I finished at the top of my class in high school and earned a full academic scholarship to Stanford. Meanwhile, my father wanted me to go to his alma mater. He saw my decision as a dismissal of his legacy. Throughout college, I balanced 2 part-time jobs while keeping up my GPA. Nevertheless, during vacations, he would ask why I wasn't interning at more prestigious firms. After graduation, I turned down his lukewarm invitation to join his business, aware that I would only be viewed as a sympathy employment. Instead, I relocated to New York City with just 2 suitcases and a strong resolve, sleeping on a buddy's sofa while applying to every finance company I could locate. When I secured an entry-level job at Goldman Sachs, his remark was, "Let's see if you make it a month." I managed not just a month, but 8 years, climbing the corporate ladder without the help of family ties or favoritism, driven partly by enthusiasm, but also by an intense need to prove him wrong. Just last month, I received a significant promotion to senior investment strategist, making me the youngest person in the company's history to achieve this position. The salary increase was considerable, enabling me to finally purchase my dream condo in Manhattan and still retain some savings. With those savings, I decided to make what I believed would be a grand gesture by buying a brand new Mercedes S-Class for my father for Father's Day. In my dream, this present would finally make him view me as accomplished, as deserving of his approval. The car was almost a year's salary, but I persuaded myself it would be worth it to finally hear him say he was proud of me. Reflecting on it now, I realize how desperate that need for approval was. This had influenced every significant choice in my life. My accomplishments weren't really for myself, but were tools in an unwinnable battle for his love. When I purchased that car, it wasn't merely acquiring a luxury vehicle. I was attempting to secure what every child rightfully deserves, a parent's unconditional love. The yearly Johnson family reunion consistently occurred on the last weekend in June, conveniently near Father's Day, meaning the event also served as a tribute to Edward Johnson's role as family patriarch. This year would be no exception, except that I had resolved to finally distinguish myself by acquiring that absurdly pricey luxury vehicle, a sleek black Mercedes S-Class, equipped with all the high-end features my father had once pointed out admiring at a friend's house at the golf club. As the day neared, my nervousness climbed to new levels. I dedicated 3 weekends to finding the ideal attire, one that exuded success without appearing overeager, was feminine yet not too light-hearted, the complex combination my father appeared to look for in women in business. I chose a navy blue custom dress from a designer my mother noted he admired, paired with understated gold jewelry and shoes that were costly yet not ostentatious. The well-worn ritual of getting ready seemed sad, even though I was part of it. It was the tired routine of someone still looking for approval at 33. Memories of past family gatherings came to me as I packed. Every milestone was shadowed by some kind of fatherly disapproval. At 17, when I triumphed in the state math contest, he questioned why I wasn't dedicating more time to debate, arguing that people good with numbers are a dime a dozen. When I finished college, summa cum laude, his sole remark was that my chosen career was less stable than real estate. My initial bonus at Morgan Stanley led him to openly question whether finance was merely sophisticated betting. And my first advancement prompted doubts about whether I was chosen to meet a gender quota. No accomplishment stood on its own merits. It was always overshadowed by his skepticism. This year brought an extra challenge, one that shook the core of who I am. It happened just 3 months ago. I tried a well-known genetic testing service, mostly out of curiosity about my heritage. What I found was startling. The genetic markers showed that I wasn't the biological daughter of Richard Matthews. After the initial shock and disbelief, I silently sought a more conclusive test, collecting DNA samples from my dad's hairbrush during a short trip back home. The results were definitive and now rested in a sealed envelope in my handbag, a decisive measure I had yet to decide whether to use. The revelation clarified so much. It illuminated the lifelong sensation of being a stranger within my own kin, the slight physical variances that everyone overlooked, the unexplainable chill from a man who otherwise showed basic warmth towards his other children always puzzled me. I believed he was aware, had always been aware, and this understanding shadowed every interaction we had ever shared. The day before the gathering, I drove the new Mercedes to my parents' suburban Denver home, after organizing for it to be delivered to a nearby dealership. I had meticulously arranged the timing for the presentation, arriving mid-afternoon when my mother would be at her book club meeting, ensuring a private moment for this peace offering. My father greeted me at the door, dressed in his usual sharp business casual outfit, even though it was a Saturday. He looked slightly irritated by the disturbance. "Eliza, you're early. The gathering isn't until tomorrow," he mentioned, glancing at his watch as though I had forgotten a meeting. "I understand, Dad. I actually brought your Father's Day present early and wanted to give it to you alone," I clarified, my heart racing as I passed him a small box holding the car key with the Mercedes emblem clearly visible. He opened it with the courteous, distant manner he typically used for mandatory gifts. His face changed to surprise when he saw the logo. "Is this a prank?" he questioned. I led him to the front window, where the brand new car was shining in the driveway. His expression showed real astonishment, then briefly, something akin to delight. However, it quickly shifted back to his usual analytical look. "This is over the top, Betty. What are you trying to show?" he asked, even as he was already heading toward the front door, key in hand. I wasn't truthful. I received a substantial promotion and desired to celebrate it with you. He walked around the car twice, scrutinizing it as if it were a real estate investment. He observed its features carefully and asked sharp questions about financing and insurance, which seemed more like an interrogation than appreciation. After a short test drive, during which he noted the steering was slightly loose, despite the car's famous handling, he parked it in the garage instead of the driveway where visitors could spot it. His thanks were superficial, quickly followed by a remark that I must be thriving to squander money in such a way, sharply undermining my generous act. That night, I phoned my best friend Madison from my hotel room, holding back tears as I shared the chilly reception. "You know what? Forget him," Madison declared with the justified frustration of a friend who'd listened to too many similar tales. "Take the car back. He doesn't deserve it." I waved off the idea, still holding on to the hope that tomorrow would be different. Maybe in front of others, he would show some gratitude, might actually notice me. "Just promise me you won't show him that test," Taylor cautioned before hanging up. "Not unless you're ready for nuclear fallout." I made a promise, yet the envelope stayed hidden in my handbag. It was a secret tool I both dreaded and couldn't quite let go of. Sunday afternoon came, bringing with it ideal June conditions, sunny skies, and a soft breeze. It seemed as though nature itself was scheming to craft the image of an idyllic family get-together. I opted for the extended path to my parents' mansion, using the drive to prepare assertive answers to the unavoidable inquiries about my personal life, my career path, my absence of a spouse or kids at the ripe old age of 33. My knuckles turned pale, gripping the steering wheel as I veered into the familiar tree-lined drive, already brimming with high-end vehicles owned by distant relatives and my father's business colleagues who somehow always ended up on the guest list for what were supposed to be close-knit family events. I noticed the Mercedes I had recently gifted him, conspicuously placed right by the main entry instead of its usual spot in the garage from the day before, intentionally situated so that arriving visitors couldn't overlook it. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed my dress, checked my makeup one final time, and strode toward the formidable front door with the practiced confidence I honed in boardrooms filled with men who underestimated me. Mother answered, her face brightening with genuine warmth as she embraced me, whispering, "You look beautiful, darling," before adding her usual, "Your father's in the back garden with the Thompson group," as if issuing a storm alert. The grand foyer was already bustling with relatives, the typical blend of actual family and my father's carefully selected collection of associates who were treated as honorary members of the Johnson family. Aunt Mary, my mother's sister, came right over with breezy air kisses and a flurry of questions about my romantic endeavors. Meanwhile, Uncle Bill extended a firm handshake along with a loud, "Here's our Wall Street genius." I was aware this would annoy my dad if he heard it. Cousins, second cousins, and family friends mingled in familiar rhythms, engaging in the same discussions they rehashed every year, with just slight variations. Every person fulfilled their assigned roles in the Johnson family theater. My father's entrance was just as choreographed as I anticipated, walking in from the garden with 3 business colleagues, all laughing at something probably only slightly amusing, but treated as hilarious due to the speaker's net worth. His eyes scanned the room, acknowledging various guests with nods and brief greetings until he spotted me. The glimmer of recognition was followed by a slight tightening of his lips before he nodded in the same manner he did to distant relatives, then walked over to my mother to whisper something in her ear. He offered no special greeting to me, his middle child, the daughter, who had just presented him with a car costing more than most people earn in a year. I pretended not to notice, deep in discussion with my cousin Rebecca about her medical residency, yet the well-known sting of neglect hurt just as much. Mother appeared beside me soon after, gently placing her hand on my arm. "Darling, your father told me you bought him a new car. That's incredibly generous," she expressed, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and worry about the lavishness. "Please come greet the Johnsons. They have just returned from a financial conference in Singapore and would appreciate your thoughts." This was Mother's way, always playing mediator, establishing social barriers, inventing excuses for exchanges that ought to occur spontaneously among relatives. Michael showed up stylishly tardy, as he often did, making an appearance with his impeccable wife, Rachel, and their 2 flawless children, getting the affectionate fatherly hug I had spent years striving to receive. "Dad, the new car is incredible." "When did you decide to upgrade?" he asked, and I watched in disbelief as my father clapped him on the shoulder and responded, "Sometimes you need to treat yourself, son. Success has its privileges," without mentioning the gift or my contribution. Emily quickly came over to me before I could process this glaring omission, pulling me into a heartfelt hug that lasted just long enough to show she understood. "I heard about your promotion." "That's incredible, Beth." "Truly remarkable," she whispered, using my childhood nickname that no one else used anymore. Her earnestness was soothing, yet the difference from our father's apathy only underscored the gap. As starters were passed around by the hired help, I saw my father guiding a group of his business colleagues toward the front driveway, gesturing vigorously. Through the expansive bay windows, I watched him flaunt the Mercedes, swinging open the doors and highlighting its features, his expression radiating a pride that was never aimed at me. "He's been at it since dawn," Emily whispered, materializing beside me. "Here, take this," she added, handing me a glass of wine which I accepted with thanks. "He's given 3 different tours to various groups of his buddies already. Mom mentioned you purchased it for him. That was incredibly kind, Elizabeth." I took a sip of the wine, observing as my father got comfortable in the driver's seat. He invited one of his colleagues to enjoy the passenger side comfort. "Generosity wasn't my motivation," I confessed softly. "Just once, I wished he would view me as accomplished, as deserving of attention." "Silly, isn't it?" Sophie gently grasped my arm, not weak, just human. "However, Beth, you must comprehend." She paused, selecting her words thoughtfully. "Dad will never provide what you seek. It's not that you aren't worthy, but rather that he's unable to. There's something inside him that's damaged, especially when it involves you." Her words struck with unexpected intensity, not because they revealed anything new, but because having someone else confirm the reality I'd lived with all my life made it suddenly, sharply real in a way my own reflections never could. The burden of the paternity test in my handbag felt as if it had grown heavier. The sealed envelope felt like a ticking bomb. I was torn between wanting to open it and desperately hoping to keep it closed. The hour before dinner passed in the usual way at Robert's family gatherings. Everyone moved to the formal living room. The room was filled with uncomfortable antique furniture and decor that was elegantly chosen by his mother, but only approved by his father. This was the one area at home where his father's opinion was dominant. I settled myself strategically on a window seat, slightly away from the main conversation circle, sipping a second glass of wine and observing the familiar family dynamics with newfound clarity. The knowledge of my genetic difference created an almost anthropological detachment. Michael naturally commanded the center of attention, captivating the assembled family with stories of his latest real estate purchase, a floundering shopping complex he planned to convert into luxury condominiums. The initial investment seemed risky to my partners, but I recognized the potential that everyone else overlooked, he explained, with our father nodding approvingly from his leather armchair. "That's the Harrison instinct," Dad interjected proudly. "Spotting opportunity where others spot failure, it's in our blood." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. The ghostly weight of the envelope in my bag felt heavier with each blood-related claim. The discussion naturally turned towards me as James wrapped up his boastful speech. "Eliza, Richard has mentioned that you've advanced at your company," my Uncle Robert observed, his tone filled with real curiosity. "Senior investment strategist, right? That's quite an achievement for someone of your age." Just as I was about to reply, Father cleared his throat. "It's a solid starting point in your career. The financial industry is unpredictable, always has been. It's not like owning something concrete like real estate." He faced toward Michael. "Tangible assets endure market shifts. They last across generations." The expected rejection still hurt, even though I saw it coming. The deliberate shift of focus to Michael and his real estate business. The subtle suggestion that my chosen career path was somehow less valuable. In fact, I started using the professional tone I adopt in challenging client discussions. My department produced 38% returns the previous quarter, exceeding the market by 22 points amidst considerable fluctuations. Our risk evaluation strategy, which I created, is now implemented across the entire company. A brief pause of admiration ensued before my father replied with a casual flick of his hand. "Just figures on a page. When the next downturn comes, we'll see how well that stands." He turned to his business partner. "Henry, speaking of property values, what do you think about the zoning changes in the Clayton corridor?" I excused myself to refresh my drink and ran into Sophie in the hallway as she came back from checking on her husband, who was looking after the children in the backyard. "Don't let him bother you," she murmured, gently squeezing my arm. "I heard about your model from John's cousin who's in finance. It's said to be groundbreaking." Her approval comforted me, even though I understood how sad it was to still seek such affirmation. As I walked toward the bar arranged in the dining room, I heard my father's voice coming from his nearby office, the door left slightly open. "The car? Absolutely. It's a significant improvement over the previous version. When you put in the effort and create something from scratch as I've done, you deserve these comforts." The male voice that answered was that of Walter Peterson, my father's long-standing business competitor and occasional partner. "Richard, you old dog. always the humble one. Your daughter Emily mentioned she purchased it for you when we talked earlier. She mentioned her promotion. It seems like she's establishing quite a reputation for herself in New York." A brief pause ensued before Dad's reply, each word carefully selected. "Yes, well, the girl has always craved attention. The truth is, her achievements stem from the opportunities I gave her. Private schools, college connections, the essential knowledge of business I instilled in all my kids. The car is just her method of demonstrating she's finally utilizing what I taught her. The casual dismissal of my achievements, the redefinition of my hard-earned independence as somehow originating from his impact when he had provided nothing but negative feedback, sent a surge of anger through me so strong I almost dropped my glass. The discussion went on, with Dad explaining why he had always been tougher on Emily than her siblings. He said she required more discipline, portraying himself as the mastermind behind her successes that he had once openly doubted. I withdrew before anyone noticed me, my anger transforming into a sharp, clear-cut rage. In the main corridor, Michael stopped me, his face showing an unusual gravity. "Eliza, could I have a word?" He led me toward a secluded spot by Mom's cherished orchid collection. "Dad noted that you've been posing odd questions to Mom about her university days. What are you really searching for?" His straightforwardness took me by surprise. Indeed, after the DNA test, I had nonchalantly asked about my mother's life before she was married, seeking hints about potential past relationships, though I believed my inquiries were quite discreet. "Just getting to know her better," I answered cautiously. Women in her era often lacked opportunities to establish their own identities before marriage and children. Michael observed me with our father's analytical look, a family resemblance so pronounced that it now seemed like more proof of my outsider status. "Listen, whatever you're up to, whatever message you're attempting to convey with lavish presence and intrusive inquiries, please halt. Our family has a specific structure, a balance. Do not disturb that with whatever dilemma you're creating." His patronizing tone was so perfectly mirrored from his father that I almost chuckled. "Harmony? Is that what you call this oppressive pecking order? This system where one person's achievements are praised while another's are diminished. I'm not making anything up, John. I'm just finally seeing things as they truly are." He moved nearer, his voice hushed to evade notice. "Dad has constructed all that we possess. The Johnson name signifies something due to his efforts. Your prestigious career in New York, your stylish apartment. All of it is built on the groundwork he laid. Show a bit of respect and appreciation for once." Before I had a chance to reply, our cousin Rebecca came over, as if she could feel the strain. "Is everything all right here? Aunt Kathy is searching for you two. I believe they're about to call us for dinner." Michael put on his public grin, the flawless sunny demeanor effortlessly returning. "Just reconnecting with my younger sister. Business discussion. Nothing significant." As he walked away, Emily lightly touched my arm. "You know, my mother always mentions that your dad treats favoritism as if it's an Olympic event he's set on winning a medal in. Honestly, I believe that what you've achieved by yourself is truly remarkable." Her subtle encouragement almost shattered my meticulously held poise. I had spent so many years convincing myself that the issue was my perception, not the actual situation, that when someone else recognized the family dynamics, it felt both validating and heartbreaking at the same time. The dinner bell rang, a signal from my mother for everyone to start heading to the formal dining room. I stayed back a moment longer, my fingers tracing the outline of the envelope in my bag, considering options, consequences, and possible outcomes. Part of me yearned to depart right away, to escape this facade of family togetherness, to shield myself from the certain hurts that the night would deliver. Yet, a more resilient, perhaps more self-destructive part wouldn't back down, resolved to endure this, to ultimately face the years of disregard with the tangible proof of its origin. I checked the envelope once more, ensuring the test results were still securely sealed within. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the dining room, preparing myself for the performance ahead. The Johnson formal dining room had always seemed to me like a perfect metaphor for our family, with its imposing mahogany table that seated 20 people, yet somehow still felt coldly impersonal. The ancestral portraits looked down judgmentally from the walls, and the elaborate place settings that prioritized appearance over comfort, just like everything else in my father's meticulously crafted world. Mother had truly excelled with the table settings, the crystal glasses shimmering under the chandelier's light, fresh floral centerpieces arranged meticulously, and name cards in flawless calligraphy designating each guest their specific place within the family hierarchy. My card was, as expected, placed towards the end of the table, sandwiched between Cousin Rachel's husband, whom I had met maybe a couple of times, and one of Dad's younger business colleagues, far removed from any significant conversation. James and his family held the prestigious spots near Dad at the head of the table, with Sophia and her husband acting as intermediaries between the core family members and the more distant relatives. Mom positioned herself at the far end of the table, perfectly embodying her role within our family. Officially on the same level, yet set apart by the long stretch of the dining surface, she was both linked to us and somewhat removed. The appetizers were served with impeccable timing. The waitstaff skillfully placed the seared scallops garnished with microgreens in front of each guest at the same moment. Father Morgan, holding a wine glass, instantly commanded silence without uttering a single word. He welcomed family and friends to our yearly gathering. He started with practiced charm, his public demeanor polished to a perfect sheen. Every year, I realize how blessed I am to have established not only a thriving enterprise, but also a legacy represented by my family. His eyes moved with pride across Michael, who gave a nod of approval, then to Emily, who beamed warmly before moving beyond me as though I blended into the background like the wallpaper. "A warm welcome to the Johnson Group joining us this year," he went on, recognizing his business colleagues. In the midst of achievement, success naturally draws in more of its kind. The celebration went on with Dad emphasizing John's latest business growth, Emily's local council position, and concluding with a sharp remark that family achievement stems from following established roots instead of needlessly questioning customs. His gaze then briefly met mine with a clear implication. As the dinner unfolded through 5 sophisticated courses, Dad guided the conversation with discreet hints and pointed inquiries, making sure the topic stayed within his favored realms of property investments, community politics where he was influential, and occasional sports talks that invariably showcased Tom's past sports successes. When Mom softly tried to bring up my latest promotion during a pause, Dad skillfully redirected. "Speaking of financial markets, Michael, what's your opinion on the recent indications from the Fed?" Effortlessly dismissing her hard work, as if it never happened. By the time we reached the fish course, the usual pattern had set in, with Dad intermittently throwing sharp questions my way, each crafted more to belittle than to involve. "Eliza, your firm mainly deals with domestic investments, right? Isn't it restrictive, considering the possibilities for global expansion? Also, I hear your promotion followed the handling of the Thompson account. It was lucky timing that Mark could connect you with John Thompson at the charity event last year." Every remark was meticulously crafted to portray any achievement as either narrow in scope or reliant on family ties I had deliberately shunned. I kept up the courteous, professional manner I had honed in adversarial board meetings, determined not to display the emotional response he appeared eager to elicit. In fact, Dad, our global department incorporated my risk evaluation model last quarter. Furthermore, the Thompson account succeeded through a blind pitch competition without any introductions needed. I presented my adjustments with a rehearsed ease, yet I observed Emily's understanding glance during each conversation. The usual family routine, uncomfortable in its predictability. The main dish was served, a needlessly intricate beef Wellington that demanded everyone's focus for a few minutes, offering a short break from the conversational dangers. Dad took this chance to uncork another bottle of exceedingly pricey wine, his intake gradually rising over the dinner, a worrying trend that Mom monitored with anxious looks. John leaned over to whisper something in Dad's ear, only to be met with a brisk dismissal. As coffee and dessert arrived, Dad's focus returned to me, his usual reservations weakened by the drinks. "Elizabeth, Michael mentioned you're still single," Mrs. Peterson remarked with sincere interest. "Such a beautiful, accomplished young woman. The men in New York must be intimidated." Before I could craft a polite reply about focusing on career advancement, my father chimed in. "Eliza has always been more about proving a point than creating something," he remarked, stirring his bourbon thoughtfully. "Some folks pursue achievements to compensate for other emptiness. Family demands concessions, something the Matthews ladies have generally grasped more effectively than she." The casual cruelty struck with practiced precision, suggesting my professional success was merely a consolation for personal shortcomings rather than an achievement in itself. Mother's sharp intake of breath was clearly heard, even from my far-off table position. "Richard," she started with unusual firmness, but he went on as though she hadn't spoken at all. Maybe if Emily had shown more interest in the appropriate suitors I introduced over the years, instead of rejecting them as dull or traditional, she wouldn't be approaching her 30s by herself. Each word was meticulously chosen for maximum impact. The public analysis of my personal decisions was framed as fatherly worry. Instead of the harsh criticism, it truly was the well-known pressure mounting behind my eyes, the youthful impulse to run from the table, clashing with the mature resolve to keep my composure. I took a deliberate drink of water, observing with impartial curiosity that my hand stayed stable despite the emotional storm brewing underneath. "I value your interest in my personal satisfaction, Dad," I replied calmly, utilizing all the negotiation skills I've acquired over the years. "But as you've always stressed, Johnson's emphasis on outcomes, and my outcomes clearly demonstrate their own merit." A strained silence descended upon the room. Family members who had seen such interactions before carefully inspected their dessert plates, as Dad's work colleagues squirmed in their seats, suddenly fascinated by the design features of the ceiling. The tightness in my chest grew with every heartbeat. It was the result of a lifetime filled with these instances. These public embarrassments, thinly veiled as familial worry. These meticulous deletions of my identity and accomplishments. The envelope in my handbag seemed to throb with latent energy, a drastic measure I had vowed to myself and Carter I wouldn't resort to. As the waitstaff cleared away the dessert dishes, I recognized with crystal clear certainty that the current route was unworkable, that continuing to seek approval from a man genetically predisposed to withhold it was a form of self-harm I could no longer afford. As coffee cups were being topped off and Brittany proposed to wrap up the elaborate dinner, Dad pushed his chair back slightly, a gesture universally recognized by the assembled family as the prelude to one of his spontaneous speeches, a tradition that had developed over years of Johnson family gatherings. The expectant hush descended instantly, conversations pausing mid-phrase, silverware gently set down, every gaze instinctively shifting toward the family head. Father rose, whiskey glass in hand, his face adopting the gracious authority he saved for these instances of public display. "Before we head to the lawn for our yearly family photo," he started, his voice carrying the distinct tone of someone used to leading gatherings, "I'd like to pause to express my joy in what the Johnson family continues to forge together." He swept his arm broadly, including the business colleagues as honorary members of this imagined empire. A family operates similarly to a corporation. It's an endeavor that demands foresight, guidance, and members who comprehend their responsibilities in forging shared accomplishments. His eyes moved across the table in a skilled manner, seemingly making eye contact with each person, yet in reality, he connected with none. As I glance around this table, I'm struck by my luck in having children who add significantly to our family's legacy. He shifted his focus to William, lifting his glass a bit. "William, your business savvy never fails to impress me, and it resonates throughout the entire Atlanta development community. The Lakeside Initiative epitomizes the sort of courageous, progressive strategy that sets Michael's endeavors apart from more modest efforts. You've not only absorbed the teachings I've imparted, but you've enhanced them." John nodded with calculated modesty that scarcely hid his pleasure, the favored son accepting his anticipated praise. Dad then turned to Olivia, his expression growing even kinder. "And Emily, your elegance in managing family duties alongside community leadership displays incredible maturity. Your involvement with the Pediatric Hospital Board has earned real prestige for the Johnson name, reminding everyone that true success involves giving back. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of the family you're nurturing and the values you embody." Madison's smile was sincere, though she seemed slightly uneasy in the spotlight. She was always more at ease helping others get recognized than accepting accolades herself. I steeled myself for what was surely coming next. The deliberate omission, the meaningful silence where my name ought to have been, the mastered art of praise through exclusion. This method would say so much to everyone there without needing any overt criticism. Yet, what occurred instead was somehow even more disheartening. Father's look settled on me, his eyes narrowing slightly, revealing the strategic intent behind his next words. "As I ponder the achievements of my kids," he went on, his voice changing in a way that some might confuse for contemplation rather than the prelude to criticism it really was, "I am amazed by the very definitions of success." He paused deliberately and took a slow sip of his brandy, letting the suspense intensify. "I'm proud of all my children," he declared, lifting his glass even higher. For a brief moment, I experienced a foolish surge of hope, swiftly dashed as he went on, except for the failure seated at the table. His words struck with deliberate harshness, followed by a moment of stunned silence before hesitant chuckles spread among the guests. Most believed it to be a private family jest rather than the outright humiliation it truly was. I felt warmth flood my cheeks, then it vanished, replaced by a chilling numbness as every gaze around the table shifted my way, showing emotions from discomfort to sympathy to keen interest. Dad went on as though he had simply cracked a light joke about the climate. Some folks gauge success by ranks and wages, by shallow accomplishments that seem notable on resume but miss depth and endurance. True achievement stems from preserving family customs, from enhancing established foundations rather than always trying to demonstrate personal value at the cost of shared resilience. The intentional ambiguity of certain individuals deceived nobody. The focus of his comments was unmistakably clear. Mother's face had turned completely pale, her fingers white as she gripped her napkin, while Michael appeared smugly pleased and Emma visibly embarrassed. Cousin Linda stretched over her husband to touch my arm in quiet solidarity, yet I scarcely noticed the action. My whole awareness sharpened to an intense focus on the man at the head of the table, who had just affirmed what the DNA test had already revealed, that I was fundamentally different, not truly part of this family in his eyes. For 20 seconds that felt like an eternity. I stood motionless, feeling the physical symptoms of embarrassment with a detached curiosity. My face flushed with heat, my throat tightened, my heart raced, the instinct to fight or flee overwhelming me with a rush of adrenaline. A lifetime of similar experiences raced through my mind. A continuous display of public corrections, subtle undermining, and accomplishments painted as failures, each one building upon the previous, culminating in the crushing message that I was fundamentally inadequate, unworthy of the name I bore. This name that genetic testing had just confirmed wasn't truly mine to claim. As my father ended his speech with a cliché about family unity that felt empty following his overt exclusion of me, something changed permanently within me. A final thread snapped between the desperate child craving acceptance and the grown woman who suddenly realized the pointlessness of that eternal pursuit. The heft of the envelope in my handbag shifted from a heavy load to a freeing force, its contents no longer a hidden disgrace, but a key freeing me from the cage of untrue expectations I had lived with all my life. The atmosphere stayed thick with uneasy suspense, anticipating my response, possibly bracing for tears or a quick departure as had occurred in past years, the expected end to the well-known family conflict. Instead, a peculiar calm settled over me, a clear sense of direction taking shape around the choice that had likely been unavoidable since the moment the test results came in. Without fully intending to, I rose to my feet, the motion so fluid and purposeful that it demanded immediate focus, halting conversations abruptly as every gaze shifted toward me, displaying emotions from curiosity to concern. These worried looks mainly came from those who had seen prior confrontations within the Thompson family. My wine glass stayed put on the table, intentionally not lifted, making it clear I wouldn't celebrate with a toast. I smoothed my gown with steady hands, amazing myself with the sheer calm that had taken over the previous chaos, as though I'd moved through a tempest into its tranquil center. "Thank you, Dad, for that enlightening speech," I started, my voice projecting effortlessly, the business-like tone I'd mastered in meeting rooms proving useful in this unforeseen instance. I've spent 33 years striving for approval that was always just out of reach, constantly comparing myself to standards that seemed to change just as I was about to meet them. Today, I finally realize why the room had become utterly silent, the type of heavy quiet that comes before important events. Mother's expression was a portrait of worry, while Father's look grew somber with the realization that this script wasn't unfolding as he had anticipated. For those keeping track, I proceeded with a forced cheerfulness that masked the significance of what was about to unfold. I graduated at the top of my class from Stanford, built a career without any family connections, and recently became the youngest senior investment strategist in the history of my firm at 29. By most objective standards, I'm far from being considered a loser. I let my gaze sweep across the table, making brief eye contact with several relatives who nodded slightly in acknowledgement before I turned my attention back to my father. Success in John Harris's world has never hinged on actual achievements, has it? It's always been about aligning with his unique perspective. It's about casting a glow on him instead of forging your own brilliance. I reached for my bag with a measured calm, fully aware that each move I made was under sharp scrutiny. The rare sight of the usually obedient middle child standing up for himself was too intriguing to overlook. "I purchased a car for you that costs more than what many earn in a year," I told my father directly. His expression had turned into the icy look he adopts during tough business discussions. "Not because you required it or even truly earned it, but because I clung to the naive hope that a significant enough gesture could finally close the unknown distance that has lingered between us all my life." From my handbag, I pulled out the envelope holding the paternity test results. The document now appeared almost ordinary, despite the gravity of the information it held. "For over 30 years, I've held myself responsible for your failure to give me the same love you give Michael and Emily. I've contorted myself into numerous forms, striving to transform into someone who might finally gain your acceptance, never realizing that the issue wasn't in what I did, but in my very genes." A collective gasp swept around the table as everyone grasped the significance of my statement. Mother's expression turned pale as John stood up with a quick sharpness. I set the envelope exactly in the middle of the table, my actions careful and intentional. "For you, Dad. Happy Father's Day," I stated with a calm finality, loading the paternal title with all the irony the moment warranted. Without pausing for a reply, I turned and strode from the dining room, my back straight, my pace deliberate, maintaining the dignity that had been steadily eroded from me throughout the evening. The stunned silence lasted until I entered the foyer, then was quickly replaced by a burst of multiple conversations, with questions blending into a cacophony of unintelligible sounds. I walked outside without pausing. The evening breeze felt cool against my warm skin, and the pathway to the driveway was lit by decorative lanterns that formed pools of light in the deepening dusk. The Mercedes was parked exactly where my father had placed it, ensuring it was clearly visible. Shining black finish reflecting the home lights, a symbol of all I'd been aiming to buy with cash that should have gone into my own place instead. The choice wasn't deliberate as much as unavoidable, my hand reaching for the extra key fob I'd stored in my bag. The car beeped softly, a sound that felt too light-hearted for this situation. I climbed into the driver's seat. The leather still had the scent of a new car, lightly combined with the subtle hint of my dad's cologne, a sensory memory of his short ownership that would quickly disappear. Looking through the windshield, I noticed shapes moving at the dining room windows, silhouettes moving vividly, the family turmoil now completely ignited by my leaving and announcement. The engine hummed to life with costly accuracy, the dashboard lighting up with greeting lights, as though nothing significant had happened. As though this was just another trip instead of a final break, with 33 years of emotional bondage. As I backed down the driveway, I saw the front door burst open. My father's silhouette outlined in the light, one hand gripping what seemed to be the opened letter, his mouth agape in what could have been my name, but was drowned out beneath. The soft purr of the American-made engine caught my attention as I sped off. The balance was notable in the luxury vehicle he had often flaunted to colleagues, all while downplaying my role. Now it physically distanced me, much like he had tried to diminish my presence for the past 31 years. Both actions of erasing converged in perfect narrative harmony. The awareness cemented what had been intuitive behavior into deliberate choice. The recovery of the gift mirrored the recovery of self-worth I was engaging in, both free from expectations of thanks that had never arrived. In the rearview mirror, the Harrison estate shrank. becoming tinier with each passing moment, its splendor lessening with the increasing gap, just as its emotional grip on me loosened with every turn of the tires that took me further. The sensation spreading through my chest wasn't joy per se, too multifaceted and poignant for such a straightforward term, but more so the novel feeling of liberty, of decisions now unrestricted by the magnetic pull of fatherly approval that had skewed my path for as long as I could recall. The Mercedes moved with silent accuracy as I steered away from the community of my youth. Each twist in the road put more space between the person I was just half an hour ago and the person I was turning into. I nearly reached the entrance to the freeway when my cell phone rang for the first time. The name Sophia lit up on the dashboard screen, quickly followed by James, my mother, and a few cousins. The digital signs of turmoil I left behind. I muted the ringer, but stopped short of turning the phone off entirely. A part of me needed to see the consequences, even though I wasn't prepared to face them head-on. As I joined the freeway bound for San Francisco's center instead of returning to Los Angeles, I allowed myself a brief look in the rearview mirror. At that moment, a man I knew to be my father hurried into the road behind me. His usually calm face was twisted into an expression I had never witnessed before. It was something beyond fury, entering a realm I couldn't quite pinpoint. The distance was too vast to hear his voice, but I didn't need sound to understand the cry from his body language, with arms thrown up in a gesture of such raw emotion that it briefly made him unrecognizable as the restrained head of family who had orchestrated years of emotional maneuvering. The image seared into my mind as I sped away, a vivid symbol of the monumental change that had just unfolded. The meticulously crafted family story shattered beyond mending by 3 sheets of scientific findings and 1 instant of complete realization. When I checked into a downtown Chicago hotel half an hour later, my phone showed 17 missed calls and 29 text messages, the electronic mirror of the chaos I had sparked before leaving. I set the room key on the desk, slipped off my heels, and at last allowed myself to go through the messages, beginning with Emily's texts, which evolved from bewilderment. What just occurred? What was in that envelope to worry Anne? Please reach out to me. Everyone is panicking due to the lack of information. Dad is saying crazy things. Mom shut herself in her bedroom. John is considering legal steps over the car issue. Initially, Mom's voice messages were calm, but they quickly became agitated. The first message was gentle. Emily, please call home when you get a chance. It evolved by her 5th message, where her voice cracked with emotion. The test can't be right. There must be some mistake. Please return so we can talk about this as a family. Michael had restricted himself to 2 messages, both warning of legal consequences if I didn't. Return father's belongings right away and take back your offensive claims. The difference in how my siblings reacted was expected. Their responses matched the parts they had always taken in our family dynamics. I sat at the edge of the motel bed, holding my phone, the physical and emotional space from the gathering already helping me see things more clearly. The paternity test had confirmed what a deep intuitive part of me had perhaps always known, that James Anderson wasn't my biological father. The emotional distance he'd maintained throughout my life stemmed from knowledge he'd carried but never acknowledged. I had obtained the test on impulse after discovering through a recreational genetic testing service that my supposed paternal genetic markers didn't align. The initial shock gave way to a strange sense of explanation. For a lifetime of felt otherness within my own family, now that the information was public, the carefully maintained family image was disintegrating in real time. years of deception crumbling beneath the force of scientific truth. The most telling reaction arrived almost 2 hours later, after I had bathed and dressed in attire from the overnight bag I had prepared in case the gathering became intolerable. A precaution that now appeared unnecessary. My phone buzzed with Elizabeth's caller ID, and an urge in me needed to hear at least one family member's voice to verify that the earthquake I'd felt had indeed happened outside and not just in my own mind. "Liz," Elizabeth whispered, her voice low, indicating she was speaking from a secluded spot in her home, still crowded with relatives. "Are you all right? Where are you?" The sincere worry in her voice almost broke through my carefully maintained composure. "I'm secure," I responded vaguely. "What's going on over there?" She let out a deep sigh. "Total chaos. An utter breakdown." After you departed, Dad unfolded the letter at the dining table in front of us all, glanced over it for about 30 seconds, then began calling out for Mom. She took one look at the contents, and her face turned ashen. They both quickly retreated into his office for roughly 10 minutes. As everyone remained seated in stunned silence, Dad suddenly burst out, "Searching for you." He noticed the car was missing and completely lost his composure. I've never witnessed him in such a state, Liz. Not ever. The clinical detailing of events allowed me to keep an emotional detachment, treating the ordeal almost like a business analysis rather than my own life unraveling. "And Mother," I inquired, fearful yet needing clarity. "She has barricaded herself in their bedroom, refusing to communicate with anyone, not even with Michael." The visitors all departed swiftly after that, as you might expect. Dad has been on the phone in his office for the past hour, and Michael is discussing some sort of legal action regarding the car, which honestly feels like the smallest concern at the moment. She paused, lowering her voice even more. "Liz, is this accurate?" "The test results. Can we trust them?" The inquiry held no critique, merely a true wish to comprehend, so typical of Sophia's conciliatory demeanor. "Indeed," I affirmed straightforwardly. "I pursued this path after a genetic testing service highlighted discrepancies. Thomas Anderson is not my biological father." Uttering the words to a family member made them suddenly profoundly real in a way that silently understanding never did. "Did you know who this is?" she whispered gently. "The test only shows that there's no match with the sample I took from Dad's hairbrush." I went over the technical details, which are simpler to talk about than the emotional consequences. However, considering when this happened and how Mom reacted, I think it involved someone she met before she married Dad. Sophie paused momentarily before posing the question that showed she grasped the situation with her typical emotional insight. "How long do you believe he's been aware?" Her inquiry struck at the core of it all. The real betrayal wasn't about the biological facts, but rather the years of emotional torment over a situation I couldn't change. Throughout his life with me, I responded with a confidence that even I found startling. "It all makes sense now, Sophia. Every critique, every juxtaposition, every unattainable benchmark. He wasn't aiming to improve me. He was chastising me simply for being." The reality of this judgment hung in the air between us, with no need to voice the numerous instances that backed it up. "I need to leave," Emily announced abruptly. "Michael is on his way up, and I don't want him to realize we're chatting. Please send me a message to let me know you're safe, no matter where you are. And Liz, no matter what comes next, my love for you remains unchanged. This doesn't alter anything between us." Her statement struck deep in my heart, the unexpected praise shattering the protective numbness I had held since departing from home. After ending the call, I walked over to the hotel window that faced Charleston Harbor. The city lights glinting on the dark water, the view both familiar and foreign, reminded me of my own reflection in the window. Somewhere in that city was the man who had molded my youth through a deliberate lack of warmth, and possibly also the mysterious man whose DNA I inherited. The parallelism of these two fathers, one present yet emotionally detached, one completely unknown but genetically linked, created an odd sense of equilibrium, as if the cosmos had at last provided an explanation for the constant sense of disharmony I've felt throughout my life. As the clock neared midnight, a surprising text came through. It was from Mom's seldom-used personal line, which she rarely employed for direct messages. "I never intended for you to discover things like this. It wasn't an affair. There was someone before your father when I was in college. When I found out I was pregnant, your father proposed marriage. He wanted to give you his last name. Please believe he tried to love you as his own. Some men simply cannot separate their feelings from biology. I failed you both by pretending otherwise. It didn't matter. Could we meet tomorrow? Just the two of us? There's so much you should be aware of." The message validated what I had sensed before, yet it introduced complexities I hadn't anticipated. It portrayed my father as both the antagonist and the casualty of his own constraints. My mother was both a deceiver and a trapped young woman, forced to make impossible decisions during a time less forgiving than today. I set the phone down on the nightstand without a word. Emotional exhaustion had finally overcome the adrenaline that had sustained me through the night. Tomorrow would necessitate choices about how much truth I sought, how much connection I could preserve or deemed worthy of preserving, and what form my life would assume now that the central organizing principle of obtaining paternal approval had been conclusively removed. For this evening, I permitted myself the comfort of emotional disengagement, of dreamless sleep untroubled by the years of questioning that had led up to this day of revelations. The week following what my mind had labeled as the disclosure progressed with the unusual dual sensation of moving both agonizingly slowly and astonishingly quickly. Every day brought fresh insights that both sharpened and muddled my grasp of my role in the world. The morning following my abrupt departure, I encountered my mother at a quaint cafe, well away from our usual spots. Her look surprised me, revealing a side of her that seemed fragile. The meticulously upheld facade of the Thompson family matriarch was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a woman who looked both older and more genuinely human than I'd ever witnessed. Her name was Teresa Thompson. She started speaking directly after our coffee was served, her fingers trembling slightly around the porcelain cup. We connected during our junior year at Wellington. He was at Merton Tech pursuing engineering. Exceptionally smart, thoughtful, and utterly unsuitable for a girl from my upbringing, according to my parents. When they learned about our relationship, they immediately prohibited it. 2 months later, I encountered your father at a charity event. He was the suitable match that everyone endorsed. The tale unraveled akin to a classic movie. A young lady coerced into forsaking a true bond for societal progress. She found out she was pregnant only after the relationship had been forcefully terminated. John Anderson proposed marriage partly out of real affection, and partly from a strategic evaluation of how Elizabeth's family ties could advance his career goals. He vowed to bring you up as his own, your mother said, her gaze set on a far point where the past remained alive. And I think he really meant to fulfill that vow. From the moment you arrived in this world, you possessed Michael's gaze, his expressions, his approach to questioning everything instead of just accepting what was presented to you. Edward did his best, but each time he saw you, he was reminded of another man's son. Visible evidence of my existence before him. The disclosures went on for 3 hours. Aspects of a past I had never imagined came to light with distressing clarity, revealing the family dynamics that had molded my life. My biological father had never been aware of my existence. Moved to Florida after graduation, established a thriving engineering company, got married, and had 3 children who were technically my half-siblings. Mom had followed his life from a distance through alumni newsletters, and in recent years, social media, yet she never reached out to him, respecting the promise made to Robert that the history would stay hidden, that I would be a Johnson in name if not in blood. By our 3rd coffee, we had arrived at the most challenging question. "Why didn't you ever shield me?" I asked, the built-up pain of years condensing into this one question. "You saw how he treated me compared to Michael and Emma. You saw him methodically belittle every accomplishment, every effort to gain his approval. How could you allow that to go on for 31 years? Her face folded with a sorrow so intense, it briefly pushed aside my fury. "I let you down," she admitted, not trying to make excuses. "Every time I thought about telling you the truth, explaining why he couldn't provide what you deserved, it never felt like the right time. The risk seemed too high. As time went on, the lie just got bigger and more difficult to set right. I convinced myself you were tough, enduring, that you were creating a life free from his endorsement. Only yesterday did I understand how deeply that quest still motivated you. Our discussion concluded without a tidy resolution, only marking the start of a more sincere relationship that would need years to reconstruct on a genuine foundation." The next morning delivered yet another profound change when I opened an email from Michael Thompson, my biological father, replying to the note I'd sent after confirming his identity through public records. His response was careful yet warm, showing surprise at discovering my existence and asking for some time to process this news. However, he also showed a real interest in connecting once he had come to terms with having a daughter he'd never known about. "I see from your email signature that you work in finance in New York," he mentioned in his first message. "Interestingly, I'll be in New York next month for a seminar. Maybe we could get together for coffee if you're up for it." The straightforward recognition of my professional role, without any conditions or comparisons, acted like a soothing salve on sore emotional scars. The impartial respect in his voice hinted at opportunities for a relationship free from the tangled Johnson family past. As these personal upheavals transformed my perception of family, the business sphere kept spinning with practical disregard for my existential turmoil. My supervisor phoned during the week to inquire about a client presentation. The routine of work conversations offered unexpected solace amidst personal tumult. "The Thompson account requires your risk assessment model to be explained in person. She mentioned they are specifically asking for you by name. Elizabeth, your reputation is on the rise. The recognition of professional merit, regardless of familial ties, underscored a truth that should have always been clear. My value stands alone, distinct from the Johnson name or its endorsement, rooted firmly in my own skills and personal integrity." Michael reached out for the first time 6 days following the family gathering through his lawyer. It was a starkly official note demanding the return of the Lexus and warning of potential legal proceedings concerning slanderous comments made publicly about paternity. The stark contrast between this response and Timothy's careful yet compassionate email clarified everything I needed to understand about the 2 men. Suddenly, genetics appeared much less important than personal character in deciding who my real father was. I asked my lawyer to organize the return of the car, making it clear that DNA proof was inherently not slanderous. James remained quiet, his dedication to his father not unexpected considering their real biological ties and common perspectives. Sophia, on the other hand, called every day. Our bond grew stronger through sincere talks about family dynamics we had both noticed but had never before talked about openly. "He's been dictating our story our whole lives," she noted during a late-night conversation, making us vie for approval that was never fairly distributed. I gained from that arrangement, but I consistently noticed how it harmed you. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more. Her admission helped mend hurts I hadn't known were still raw. The confirmation of my experiences from someone who had seen them firsthand, strangely more impactful than any test result could be. 6 months following that eye-opening moment, the scenery of my life had changed in ways both minor and significant. Weekly therapy sessions helped unravel the intricate mesh of conditional love and performance anxiety that had fueled my accomplishments, enabling me to identify real achievement apart from desperate seeking of approval. My relationship with my mother transformed into something truer. She left behind her meticulous act of perfection for open, occasionally tough discussions about decisions, outcomes, and the intricate love that had always underpinned the Johnson family dynamics. I encountered John Carter for the first time at a tranquil eatery close to Liberty Park. It was both disconcerting and strangely reassuring to witness my own expressions and behaviors reflected in a man I had never met before. "You possess my mother's analytical mind," he noted during dessert, deep into a dialogue that unfolded with unexpected fluidity. "But that spark when you talk about market patterns, that's clearly from my side." Our relationship grew carefully, both of us respectful of its unusual start, neither expecting immediate father-daughter closeness, but building a connection through shared intellectual interests and discovering genetic commonalities that explained lifelong traits I'd never noticed in the Thompson family. The final piece of this transformed life mosaic fell into place at Thanksgiving when I accepted Grace's invitation to dinner at her home rather than the traditional gathering at our parents' estate. Michael had declined to attend when informed of my presence, his continued rejection now producing more pity than pain, his limitations becoming more obvious as my own healing progressed. "He can't change," Evelyn remarked as we arranged the dessert together, her kids frolicking in the next room with her husband. "Not won't genuinely can't. His whole identity is constructed on certainties that your presence disputes." The statement held no judgment, just an acknowledgement of the steadfast reality we had both come to accept. After dinner, Mom's voice rang out, stronger than I recalled from my youth, the rehearsed precision now replaced by genuine connection. "I'm proud of you, Emily," she stated plainly. "Not for your career or your home or any accomplishments, although those are impressive. I'm proud of who you are, your resilience, your ability to create truth from deceit. I should have told you that every day of your life." The words I'd longed to hear from Michael for 3 decades, generously offered by the parent who had always loved me despite her imperfections, struck with a healing power precisely because they were delivered unconditionally and without reservations. As I hung up the phone, I grasped the deepest insight from this 6-month adventure. Family goes beyond DNA and official labels, embracing those who truly see and love you for who you are. They cherish your genuine nature instead of expecting you to play predetermined roles. The expensive car I bought in a vain attempt to win over a father figure who could never fully embrace me had been taken back and then sold. The money was invested in my future instead of wasted on seeking approval. More importantly, I had regained the emotional energy previously spent on a futile quest for validation. I redirected this energy toward relationships that enriched rather than drained me, toward work driven by passion instead of a need to prove my worth, and toward creating a life defined by personal satisfaction rather than public acknowledgement. The path from that pivotal family dinner to this new balance was neither straight nor easy. Each day brought new challenges and some setbacks. Yet, the overall direction was consistently toward healing, not more harm. Perhaps the most significant signs of growth were not from big revelations. They came on quiet Tuesday mornings. Those mornings, I woke up without instantly judging my worth. We celebrated achievements for their true value instead of seeing them as ways to finally gain my father's approval. Life was lived from a genuine base, not out of a need to perform. As Thanksgiving evening drew to a close, it dawned on me that although I had unraveled the enigma of my fatherhood, the more profound revelation was that its significance had lessened with every stride toward self-acceptance. The issue of whose genes I inherited became far less critical than whose values I decided to adopt, whose affection I acknowledged as sincere, and whose honesty I embraced as my own. Have you ever found that your real family isn't always determined by blood? Often, the people who are supposed to love us without conditions are the ones who wound us the most. I would appreciate reading your experiences in the comments section about how you have formed your own chosen family or confronted those who failed to recognize your value. If my narrative struck a chord with you, please click the like button, subscribe for more stories of recovery, and pass this along to someone who might need a reminder that their worth isn't contingent on someone else's approval. Thank you for tuning in. And recall, at times reclaiming your strength means stepping back from individuals who never merited it to begin with.